When viewers become the jury, how group dynamics redefined this episode. This episode did not just spark reactions, it triggered a wave of moral positioning from the audience, and if you stay until the end, you will see how a single moment turned into a broader judgment about character, values, and emotional accountability. The most intense reactions did not focus on romance itself, but on how quickly viewers felt compelled to take sides, because what happened activated a strong sense of right and wrong that went far beyond the relationship shown on screen. What stood out immediately is how many viewers interpreted the interaction as a reflection of deeper character traits, not isolated behavior, which suggests that audiences are constantly looking for patterns rather than explanations. In my opinion, this episode became a mirror for social values, because reactions were less about personal preference and more about what people believe should never be normalized in close relationships. A significant number of comments framed the situation as an imbalance of power, where one person appeared emotionally exposed while the other seemed emotionally detached, and this contrast heavily influenced public perception. What is fascinating is how the presence of friends intensified judgment, since viewers often see group settings as a test of respect, and failing that test tends to amplify criticism rather than sympathy. Another layer that fueled reactions was moral signaling, where viewers use strong language not just to express opinion, but to align themselves publicly with empathy, protection, and emotional awareness. From a psychological angle, this reveals how audiences often project collective standards onto reality television, expecting participants to model behavior that reflects emotional maturity rather than raw authenticity. Several reactions also questioned intentions rather than outcomes, suggesting that even without malicious intent, careless behavior can still be perceived as emotionally harmful. What I find compelling is how viewers rarely debated facts, but instead debated meaning, proving that perception often outweighs context when emotions are involved. As you reflect on this dynamic, I would genuinely like to know whether you felt the audience reaction was fair or exaggerated, so share your thoughts in the comments and stay engaged, because the final insight of this analysis changes how this moment should be understood. As the discussion unfolded online, what became increasingly clear is that viewers were not only reacting to behavior, but also to what they believed that behavior symbolized about accountability, empathy, and emotional awareness within adult relationships. In my view, this moment exposed how reality television invites audiences to act as moral referees, because once emotions are publicly displayed, viewers feel entitled to assign meaning, intention, and even future outcomes based on a single interaction. Many reactions reveal a deep intolerance for what feels like emotional carelessness, especially when one person's vulnerability is met with deflection, humor, or silence rather than acknowledgement. What also intensified the response is how easily audiences interpret repeated patterns, because once viewers sense a recurring dynamic, even small moments begin to confirm a broader narrative in their minds. From a social perspective, this episode highlights how group environments change accountability, since words spoken in front of others carry a symbolic weight that transforms personal issues into collective experiences. Another interesting detail is how viewers rewarded emotional transparency with protection, often shifting blame toward those perceived as emotionally dominant, which shows how empathy shapes public judgment more than factual balance. As reactions continued, the conversation slowly moved away from the couple itself and toward larger questions about respect, emotional labor, and what healthy communication should look like in long-term partnerships. What stayed with me is how many viewers expressed disappointment rather than anger, because disappointment suggests unmet expectations, not hatred, and that distinction matters when evaluating public response. This moment ultimately became less about conflict and more about emotional standards, with viewers signaling that growth, sensitivity, and self-awareness are not optional once a relationship reaches a certain depth. If this episode made you reflect on how quickly judgment forms in group settings and how emotional responsibility shapes perception, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments and support the discussion by liking and subscribing, because these conversations are where perspective truly evolves.